Timberborn hit 1.0 earlier this month and has already cemented itself as the best beaver colony simulation game of all time. A fairly niche title, but a victory nonetheless, so why not go through everything you need to get started to ensure you keep your colony alive and thriving. Really quick, before we get into the guide, I should probably mention that there are two options when it comes to selecting what kind of beaver colony you want to create. By default, you'll just have access to the folktales, but eventually you can unlock the iron teeth. These function more or less the same with some slight changes to their building selection and a strong focus on certain types of technology, but most of this guide will still be applicable. The only changes that really set them apart is whilst folktales breed new beavers the old-fashioned way, the iron teeth grow their babies in growth vats, so you'll want to build some of these to keep your population growing. Okay, with that out of the way, let's load into our folktales game on the lakes map for a nice chill start. When you first load into the world, you'll have your district centre, a handful of beavers, and a small supply of food. Immediately, you want to get to work harvesting resources to keep your population healthy, and first and foremost, you're going to need wood. Wood and logs are the primary building material in-game, so you'll want to set up some production as soon as you load in. To do this, you can build a lumberjack flag. When deciding where to build, you want to select somewhere nearby to trees, and you can see their area of influence by this blue box. Select somewhere with plenty of trees, ensure you can connect it to your centre with paths, and once built, a beaver will start working there. For them to harvest any wood, you'll need to mark trees to be cut down, so just drag the box over your desired area, and they'll get to work. With these, you'll be able to get to work on all the other buildings you need to survive. Keeping your beavers alive mainly comes down to two main resources: food and water. Food has a lot more sources and production chains, but at baseline, you'll need to make sure you have enough of anything to keep your beavers alive. Initially, harvesting wild berries is a great idea, as they're naturally occurring and are fairly renewable as the game goes on. However, they're not the fastest to renew, so instead you'll want to explore other options, and the first among these is farms. These allow you to plant and grow various crops which can then be used to feed your population. The first crop you should plant should always be carrots. Not only do they grow very quickly, they're also edible with no further processing, so can be sent straight to storage to feed your beavers. Speaking of which, it's a great idea to build storage for pretty much all the resources you can. This goes for food, building materials, and basically anything else that you're going to be producing en masse. Not only does this allow your workspaces to stay busy even when consumption is low, it also ensures if you run into any issues, you'll have a nice buffer of resources to help bail you out of it. Sunflowers also require no extra processing, but take longer to grow and provide less yield, so are not a great idea until later farms. They'll still be useful for keeping your population happy, but for keeping them alive, they're not a priority. Potatoes and wheat both require further processing, so can be a great choice, but not until later when you have these signs and workers to make the most of them. For water, you simply build a water pump next to a clean supply of water, and it'll pump away, providing your colony with drinkable water. If you want to up your reserves or even centralize water access, then build some storage somewhere central, and boom, consider your beavers hydrated. After all, it always helps to avoid cystitis. Water sources, however, are not a permanent guarantee. As the game goes on, droughts will occur, draining water from the map, which can result in disaster if you don't stock enough in reserve. To combat this, you can build plenty of tanks and pumps to ensure you produce far more than you consume and have plenty in reserve. Alternatively, you can use dams to block water in, effectively creating a reserve directly in your supply. Neither approach is wrong, it all just depends on what you prefer, but personally, I'd stick with the dams. That way you have less workers in your water system, less buildings that will sit idle during a drought, plus damming water also keeps the land hydrated, which is useful for keeping food and other crops alive. With a steady supply of food and water, your population should remain healthy, and at this point you can start looking at the fun stuff. First and foremost, you should build at least one inventor. These provide you with science which is required to unlock all late game buildings, and will allow you to unlock the full potential of your beavers in no time. Science can allow you to make use of everything from new ways to prepare high quality food, all the way to creating robot beavers to increase your workforce. Whilst they are earning your first bits of science, you should also set up your first power system, and for this you have two options. Option 1 is a power wheel, which requires beavers to run on a wheel to produce a small amount of energy. Whilst this can be useful in more remote areas of the map and isn't reliant on water flow, it eats up workers and takes lots of beavers to make any meaningful amount of power. Option 2 is water wheels. These must be placed in water and require it to be flowing to function, but they produce a nice chunk of power, enough to power a number of early buildings, no problem. They may be useless during a drought, but during normal water flow, they're constantly producing and require no workers, so are a pretty sweet deal. Your first powered building will almost always be the lumber mill to process logs into planks, and I'd advise placing this as close to your power source as possible so you don't have to route power across the entire map. You can get power around using power shafts, but obviously these require more building resources, and in the early game, these can get pretty limited. I'd build a single power shaft and then attach your building like so. This leaves you room to connect other buildings to the same network without having to overcomplicate things later. That said, it is worth remembering that powered buildings can connect to other powered buildings to spread the power between them. So this shaft is more so here if you need to move power somewhere else that isn't directly adjacent to your powered buildings, for example, across a path. With these two ticking along, you'll also want to think about increasing your population to staff all these new workplaces. To do this, you simply need to build more housing. Beavers will only reproduce if there's an empty shelter to accommodate them, so build enough lodges to accommodate whatever population you want, and it will slowly rise. I'd advise increasing the amount of shelter slowly, as if you rush high population, chances are you'll end up running low on food or water and have no way to recover. Also, bear in mind that beavers are first born as kits, which cannot work but do consume resources, so going slowly to ensure you have a majority of your population working is a great idea. Now, whilst you might be wondering what to unlock and build first with this science and these planks, my recommendation would be the Forester. This is a building that allows beavers to plant bushes and trees, essentially giving you unlimited logs, since natural forests don't regrow after being cut down. It only costs a small amount of signs, so it should be available fairly quickly, and I'd suggest placing it on terrain that doesn't dry out during a drought. You'll want trees to grow quickly, and whilst most varieties can survive quite a while without water, it's best to keep them growing constantly since it can take quite a few days to reach full size. You'll also want to make sure they have plenty of room to plant lots of trees, since you'll obviously want to make the most of their ability as much as you can. When planting trees, you'll notice that you have 5 options. Each variety takes longer to grow than the last, but also produces more log per day spent growing. For example, the birch grows in just 7 days, but only produces a single log, whereas the oak takes 30 days and produces 8. This means in the long term, the later varieties are the way to go to get the most wood per day. However, early on, when you may not have a lot of logs lying around, it can be worth it to plant some birches to ensure you have some to use, rather than having to wait a month. 3 of these varieties also have secondary products that can be harvested by various buildings, such as gathering flags and tapping stations. You don't really have to worry about these just yet, but it's good to familiarise yourself with them for later, as they'll all come in useful eventually. At this point, you will have a renewable source of food, water and building materials, so the world really does become your oyster. Timberborn may be a city builder with survival elements, but at its heart, it's a creative toolset designed to let you pursue whatever you fancy. There is no right or wrong answer when deciding where to go from here, but if you want some suggestions, take a look at the population wellbeing menu. From here you can see every single one of your population's needs and desires, and fulfilling these will raise your well-being. The higher this is, the longer your beavers will live and the faster they will move and work. Needless to say, you'll want to aim to get this as high as possible as soon as you can, as it will make your population as productive as possible. The easiest ways to improve well-being early on are with a variety of food, social activities and decorations. Advanced food is quite simple, with only a handful of steps for any supply chain. Standard farms can grow sunflowers, as I mentioned earlier, which have quite a low yield but raise well-being, so once you have a lot of food in reserve, you can start to grow them without fear of running out too quickly. You can also grow potatoes and wheat, but both of these require further steps to make them edible. Potatoes can simply be cooked on a grill, so are pretty straightforward. Wheat must be made into flour using a grist mill, and then baked into bread in a bakery. These 2 buildings will require research, so potatoes are a safe bet until you have enough signs to unlock them. Speaking of which, don't be afraid to build a few more inventors once things are stable. They work constantly and allow you to unlock more advanced buildings faster, so they're a great use of work time. Beyond this, you can unlock the water farm to plant spadderdock and cattail, both of which have similar production chains to potatoes and wheat. Then beyond that, you can plant chestnut and maple trees to harvest chestnuts and syrup, though the latter will require use of a tapper shack, which is more research and advanced materials. Social buildings are things like campfires, rooftop terraces, and more. Most of these are just buildings you simply place and beavers will make use of them with no need for further resources. Just check the wellbeing menu to ensure you have enough capacity for your population, and you're golden. Decoration or aesthetics is just as simple. Just build decoration items around your settlement, nearby to shelters and workplaces. Then check the wellbeing screen, see if everyone is covered, and if not, place a few more in some other areas. In building each of these 3 needs, you run into buildings that require more advanced materials like gears or eventually even metal. Whenever you run into one of these blockades, it's a good idea to set up production for that new resource, as long as the steps required to do so are within reason. For example, gears require planks and some power, so a pretty simple setup. Metal, however, requires access to scrap, a scavenger flag, and a smelter, so it's a bit more of a commitment, especially if not many buildings need it right now. Also, look at the production chains within each building you're considering, as there is no point building a bot part factory if you can't even make biofuel yet. Since there is no traditional tech tree and you can technically unlock anything at any time, it is possible to waste science, so try to take your due diligence to make sure you're making the most of everything you can. As the game progresses, the droughts you experience will start to become longer lasting, meaning your water reserves and time spent without power can go on for a while, potentially harming your settlement. You'll need to steadily increase your reserves for water and other resources relying on flow to ensure you can survive these increasingly long droughts. For water, you'll again want to make use of dams and other landscaping tools to block water movement during droughts to give you the largest reserves you can. By making use of lakes or rivers, you can ensure you have a steady supply of water for weeks if you have to. It all just comes down to where you place those blockages and how you control the flow. Power is a lot more complex, but more than possible to manage during longer droughts. You can explore other power generation options such as wind turbines. These generate power based on the wind, meaning they not only want to be placed high up, they're also not super reliable, but will function during a drought, so are not only a good option, they're pretty much the only one. You can also make use of gravity batteries which store energy for later use, meaning any surplus power, for example, wind turbine generation at night when no one is working, can be stored when buildings are consuming. It's a great option for reducing wasted energy and balancing out less reliable production. No matter the resource, the most important aspect in the build-up to droughts is surplus. You want to make sure you have more than enough food and water to get your population through it. If you see yourself running low during a non-drought season, build up your production to keep yourself well in the green, otherwise a drought will likely spell your doom. Alongside droughts, you'll also have to worry about bad water tides. These flood the waterways with bad water, which not only dries out the land but also contaminates it, killing crops in no time. Navigating these is significantly more challenging than droughts since contamination ravages your lands near instantly, meaning you want to avoid letting it near your home at all costs. To do this, you'll want to make full use of various landscaping structures such as floodgates and contamination barriers to direct water and block contamination from touching your land. Your exact setup will vary depending on your map and how you built out your settlement, but the goal is to be able to temporarily direct water away from your settlement. That way, it's just like a regular drought rather than a world-ending tide of filth. The last thing you'll want to worry about alongside planning your zipline kingdom is when to break off into separate districts. Each district centre can only serve so large an area. Eventually they'll run out of range, and in the later game when you need to explore to find more resources like metal and badwater, chances are your first district will not be able to reach. At this point you'll need to build a second one and essentially start a whole new colony. Before you do this, it's super important that your first one is totally self-sufficient. If both require constant attention, it's going to be too much to handle, so you really want to make sure that your home base can pretty much take care of itself. Once you're ready to, simply build a new district centre wherever you need it and send a few beavers over to get it started. To do this, you'll want to select a centre and hit the Migrate Population button. From here you can send as many beavers as you feel is necessary, but I think about 10 or so should be plenty to get you started. It's important to note that this new colony will initially be completely isolated, which means no goods from your home district will be sent over. That means it'll need to produce food, water, building materials, and provide everything else your original settlement does for this whole new population. It really is like starting a new game, just in the same map as your existing one. You can trade goods back and forth making use of the district crossings, and I would heavily advise building one of these for your more isolated colonies that may not be able to provide for themselves. You will need to sort your import and export settings to ensure goods can travel back and forth, but it's as simple as selecting import no matter what on your new district and dropping the export threshold of your old district, and boom, goods will start heading to your new colony. Be sure to adjust these as and when you need new resources, or stop needing them for that matter. No use sending over a bunch of stuff the new colony won't ever use, so absolutely keep track of what's coming and going. If your new colony is turning into a disaster, remember you can always send your beavers back home rather than letting them die, so it's okay if everything isn't perfect immediately. And with that, I think you are ready to head out into the world and create your very own successful beaver colony. I'm sure I probably missed something, so if you have any more questions, let me know in the comments below. Like the video if you did, subscribe for more guides, and if you want more survival game content, then why not check out my review of Cairn, also known as Game of the Year.